Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very fortunate today to be joined by Janthana, who's the CEO of Tapoly. Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. And
Good.
Thank you for having me on your show.
No, not at all. Thank you so much for being a guest. You're someone that we've wanted to have on for quite some time, actually, because we see you're quite prominent on social media. You're quite prominent on speaking engagements. So, and I heard really good things about you. So I was very, very happy that you accepted to be part of the show. So, and we can't not mention the fact that it's good timing, which we didn't plan. That is International Women's Day today. Without giving it a lot away, we've kind of centered some of our conversation around topics which might be hyper relevant for today. But before we dive into those issues, love for you to introduce the Tapoly business and yourself, because you're the best person to do so. So please tell us about Tapoly for those that don't know.
Yes, so in brief, Tapoly is a digital insurance provider here in the UK, and outside the UK, we are a technology provider for the insurance industry.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Fantastic. And what was your journey? You're not. Were you an insurance person? That's what we.
No, actually, I think I bring a lot of diversity into the insurance industry based on my background and what I did. I used to work for investment banks. I'm a chartered accountant by trade, but been in insurance now for 5 years. Ever since I quit my corporate job to run my own company, I've been in insurance ever since. And obviously, Tapoly value proposition is all about bringing this new flexible on-demand insurance to the gig economy.
Okay. Yeah. There's been lots and lots of different competing businesses trying to tackle this gig economy and really kind of small business. I think and particularly that kind of small business, whether it be solopreneurs or small businesses like mine, we're only a 5-man business as we stand. From a practical perspective, do you think the insurance industry is really set up to deal with small businesses? Because it's difficult, I think, for them to be effective at small business. So do you think it's set up to serve the small business industry?
Yes and no, to be honest. Obviously, insurance has been here for as long as we know, and small business has been able to access the insurance product even today. However, the lifestyle of some of the our customers have changed. Especially during COVID, it really kind of take the gig economy to the next level. And that means that the level of flexibility that our customer need currently are not embedded into the existing insurance products. So this is when Tapoly come in. We're trying to bridge that gap. We know that our policy need to be a little bit more flexible. We know that customer need to get insurance more quickly and painlessly, and also more cheaply, and that's why we exist.
Yeah, I think there's so much about simplification of insurance that I understand that it's challenging, because some of the we've talked to death about simplification, and regulation has a part to play in that as well. Unless we can simplify the regulation, or whether we should simplify the regulation, it makes it very difficult for things like wordings to be effective. But access to is a big thing. Do you think the regulation environment is doing enough to kind of help insurers on that journey to kind of serving customers?
I think insurance, considering of what we do, we build trust and we sell future promise. So it needs to be regulated for the sake of the customer. But at the same time, too much regulation will cost money, and cost money, who's going to pick up the bills? The end customer. So at the end of the day, the over increasing regulation will only add on to an increased premium to customer. But it's a trade-off, I guess. We need to have that regulation to protect the customer. At the same time, we want to make sure that the cost of serving customer are at bare minimum. And that's why, like Tapoly is very relevant to this in these situations where you can't increase costs, or you shouldn't be increasing your premium, but you can always lower your costs. And Tapoly is all about, bringing that operational efficiency through technology and leaner process, so that we can contain and maintain our costs at bare minimum in order to be able to keep our profit level to the level that is feasible for us to offer our insurance products.
Yes. Yeah. There's Well, there's some quite famously some very large insurtechs out there that are doing very well from a kind of growth perspective, but profitability seems to be an issue. But probably won't open that can of worms right now. But I wanted to talk to you about innovation, because that's a large part of what we set this podcast up to do. And I wanted to ask you about how, because it's my belief that innovation starts with leadership, and I don't think that's controversial. I think innovation absolutely starts from the top. How do you approach this at Tapoly from a practical perspective? How do you practically implement innovation?
I think innovation, obviously, it has to be built on the company culture and value. It has to be embedded into everything we do. So the way we approach it is in kind of 3 different steps. The first one is the recruitment and retention. We make sure that we recruit diverse and workforce, and we always make sure that everyone feel included and that everyone feel like they are part of the team. So collaboration is important as our nature. And then of course the kind of accountability and responsibility piece, where we've got the right people on to our team. We also need to give them like very specific, we need to empower them, if that makes sense, so that they can then be able to do their job more effectively, and also have the ability to perhaps get outside their comfort zone and allow them to benefit from their talents. And the last part is more like kind of control and framework that we have to put in play in order to make sure that everyone know exactly what they need to do within their defined role and responsibility. And of course the measurement, it's go with that, you be able to measure everyone's performance. So if you have these 3, then suddenly you've got a successful a workforce and framework to be able to embrace the diversity and the inclusion within the company.
It's difficult though, isn't it? I think in a practical sense, how do you guys try and go about that? Because one of the challenges, we specialize in as a recruitment business, working with startups and scale up businesses, and the growth and the progression and the speed required is, there's always a trade-off between, are you really getting a representative diverse pool of candidates versus finding a good candidate, and then do you find a good candidate, just hire them and move on? And then you get these things. I had a founder that was very genuinely really concerned, and basically built a kind of 90% white male workforce, and he said we were just trying to move quickly, and it's that classic thing that they'd hired lots of good people they knew, but that was their circle, that was their world, so it was very difficult. So in the sort of practical sense, how do you guys go about trying to make sure you're getting at least a really diverse bunch of applicants in?
Yes, I think from our kind of recruitment perspective, we tend to go with people who are interested in what we do. First of all, they have to have certain characteristic and value. We go with the right person, not necessarily if they have the right skill to start, because we can't afford to pay for experienced people. So we go for talents. And with any talents, it's all about providing them with the right training. So you have to make sure that you've got people and the trainings in place to be able to make most of their talents. And what I do is that I mix I mix very senior people at a consultancy level. So we bring in consultant as we need it. And we have our own talent that we cultured and we built our kind of upskill our team. So that's kind of worked really well, that mix between the two. In terms of diversity, I obviously, because I have such a diverse background, when I think about diversity, it just comes naturally to me. People pick people that they feel comfortable with. And to be honest, I don't know who would make me comfortable or not comfortable, because I don't have that barrier like everyone else. I don't have to be in a room of like-minded people. I can be in the room with completely different people, and I don't have like very strong bias to a certain nationality or ethnic minority, or I don't have that. I didn't grow up with it. So therefore, when people talk to me, they probably can sense that I don't have that barrier. And we would always go with the best on CV. Provided that they pass our recruitment interview process, then they get in.
Yeah. I think that's a really important thing. I talk about this a lot in insurance. Talent. It's very difficult to measure, but I think we all very quickly go, well, this person's talented and they're smart. And I think we can, particularly insurance has been guilty of being obsessed with specialization. But once an underwriter, always will be an underwriter. You sort of get someone and they accidentally come out of university and end up being, I don't know, a offshore energy underwriter. And then it's almost like they can't move out of that silo. And you think, well, if they're a really good offshore energy underwriter and they're really smart, I'm pretty sure they'd be a pretty good claims professional, or we could train them into another sector. And I think one of the positives, particularly for me, about the Insurtech industry is giving people more of a shot to try those types of things, because you're in a startup, you can't afford to be that siloed either. People have to wear many, many hats. I wanted to take you back to something you said about hiring the right personality types, because you made a really important point when we spoke previously. You made this point that really stuck with me, which is about connected to insurance is a social good, which I think we both agree on. And how important is it hiring the right personality types when you're providing a social good? And I think you made this brilliant point that we're selling trust. So what does that mean about the sort of the right types of personalities that we have to bring into the business?
Yes, I think it's crucially important, because it's much easier to build on someone's skills than change their behavior and beliefs. And that's why having the right personality who embrace already the culture of being, trustworthy, transparency, and customer focus, you got, they got the basics to become extremely good insurance broker, for example. So I think with any job, I would prefer to choose the right person or personality type over the right skill, because like I said to you, we are we're looking for talent rather than experience, and we want to be able to culture them into our culture. Like any one of the biggest challenges for bigger organization is that the culture within the big organization is extremely difficult to change, and that's when innovation, it's harder for innovation to create when culture is not catered for innovation. Whereas us, we don't have the issue with the culture. So also bringing in your own talent allow them to be able to fit in nicely with the culture that's already there. Whereas if you get someone more experienced, they're so used to certain culture, it's very difficult to bring them into yours. Yeah,
and I think big businesses have that challenge of they're not either one culture either. They tend to be so large, particularly like large insurance carriers, large insurance brokers, that or large technology firms, that they're silos of individual cultures, and it's very stereotypically about teams. I've worked with companies where their sales team is in a completely different office to everyone else, because the thinking, or at least the kind of the feedback is, oh, they're a different culture, different types of people. And I thought, well, that doesn't help, does it? Like, that's not what that's, you're not bridging those two different divides. You're actually making that problem worse. And then you get these two very different values organizations within the same organization. So I think that's a huge challenge. How do you envisage tackling that as you grow? Because as you grow, it becomes much harder. Have you thought about that as you get bigger? How do you kind of keep that culture together?
Yeah, obviously, I'm a big fan of aligning our process and system with our culture. And that means that bringing people together is important. Collaborations is number one success for any kind of successful business. So and we will have there's few things that we do internally, for example, that embrace that. One is team meeting. We've got team meeting, not just individual a team, but we also have a joint up meeting for all our team to collaborate and meet each other to exchange, any kind of issue that we may see in the technology space that actually impact business and vice versa. So we have that coordination. And then of course, party, like team building exercise is very important. That's when people meet face to face now today, because we don't, get to go to, it's not a 9-to-5 office culture anymore. So it's just more like working remotely now within our team. So it's important to have that. And also it's important for people to hear from me directly. I think, like this tone at top, I need to be able to kind of very clearly articulate what the culture would be like, what is our focus going to be like, and be able to communicate that clearly to my team and break it down into tasks and responsibilities so that everyone know exactly what they need to do. So a lot of it is down to also the management to coordinate the whole collaboration and communication piece.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's a new bunch of challenges as well. And I think in many respects, startups have got an advantage in setting up remote first ideas. I'm going the reverse way. I'm sort of started getting an office space now, and we've got more of us, and I like that. But then we've got people that are remote, and you've got that challenge of, well, how do you make them feel part of it? That's a new challenge I'd not thought of, in that you've got this one remote worker and now they're not part of the kind of office environment. So how do you make them feel part of it? So the answer so far has been really expensive train fares, getting them to come to us once a week. I wanted to ask you further about another brilliant point I think you made, which was, I think this is really about the clash between morals and motives in insurance. And I think we were talking about a lot of products and are we selling products that actually have worth to the customers we're selling them to? I think that was kind of where we're going. And how do you view that kind of challenge? And do you think we're getting it right industry wise? Do you think there's still some of that kind of leftover kind of bad behaviors? Are we selling things that people don't need, or things that we know are no good?
I think obviously that there's always going to be a slightly conflict when you run a business and you focus on profit. Most businesses focus on profit and not purpose. So therefore, if you look at sales department, classic example, every KRI would be all about how much you can sell. It's a numbers game. The rising store are the one that can sell the most, but we never perhaps we should be thinking about bringing in other metric that also show the quality of your service and the fact that you do the right thing by customers, and not, for example, selecting policy that may be too expensive when you can go for lower at a slightly more suitable for customer. So there's a lot of that. Do we do what is best for ourselves or for our customer? And it's always, we should always look to do what is best to our customer, because that is long-term, is more long-term to care about your customer. Like, a good business, they always put the customer in the center of everything we do. And if something are very pro that. That's why we got all this regulation to protect customer interest. I think, you know, as a kind of CEO of my own company, I am very cautious about how I set our KRI, how we measure customer, our team performance as well. But in essence, our value or our kind of, you know, objective is to add value to our customer. That is our objective, and that means that whatever happens, you know, we would rather, you know, like spend more time and cost us a little bit more if it means offering better service. So that is, you know, how we approach this internally within Tapoly.
Yeah, I'm very much of the same thinking. It's difficult though, isn't it? It's tackling that motivation behavior. I tried to do something experimental with our bonus culture, which was to get people to vote on. We were going to hold back a section of it, and basically your colleagues had a kind of like blind input in it, and then I thought I was just opening up some sort of toxic situation I was going to have to manage, and I won't lie, I backed away from it. But I think you've got to be open to trying those things, behavioral drivers, any lever you can pull. And
it's quite easy, by the way, it's easier said than done, because obviously you are, you know, like kind of small company, and our running cost is always going to be at risk if we cannot raise more money. And to raise more money, we have to show tractions and growth. The majority of KRIs for investors is all about how much money we make. It's not even about how much profit, you know, it's the profit level is not always important as long as we can show the growth in sales. And that, you know, like alone, I think it's quite dangerous to have that for insurance or Insurtech companies, because we are in a heavily regulated company and we should behave in a certain way. So we don't want to have kind of metric that going to steer us into, you know, like being profit driven as opposed to purpose driven company.
Yeah, it's a real balance. I think it comes full circle to how we started this conversation, which is that you've got to hire the right people, and that's been my driver. You know, I think I can teach. I mean, it's very easy for me to say. I mean, recruitment is, relatively speaking, a simple business, and so as a result, I just need to hire the right people. But I think that there can be more emphasis on that, and a little bit of that is acknowledging and knowing that recruiting good people is hard. It's going to take you a long time, and it goes into kind of you proactively trying to constantly connect with good talent, which I don't think enough people do. I wanted to move on to something about sort of personality types, and how important you think it is to kind of acknowledge the different personality types within a team. You know, for example, how do you make it collaborative? Because how do you avoid it being loudest voice in the room dictates, you know, the tone or the action that you take?
Yeah, I think it's extremely hard, to be honest, with anything, you know, like when it's much easier to have a room full of people that are like yourself, because you can predict what they're going to think or do. Whereas if you have, you know, diverse personality type in the room, suddenly you have to be able to balance all of those diversity and how you manage someone communication, like an introvert, for example, will need some time to think, and they would prefer to be asked before they say something, whereas an extrovert would love to bounce that idea off the team, for example. So you kind of have to balance that mix of personality type, and it I would say, you know, from my perspective, it doesn't come naturally. I actually have to do a lot of studying, reading up, and practice in order for me to kind of get better understanding of how, you know, every personality type can work together, how we can collaborate. And it's been an eye-opening to me, you know, like to be able to get the best out of my team and not misunderstand them. Because you know what you are, but you don't always know other people personality type, not always, and the misunderstanding could cause a lot of conflict within the teams. It could cause, you know, like kind of a collaboration to fail and things like that. So having good understanding and also know how to manage and clear conflicts will help everyone to work together better.
Do you ever use anything like psychometric assessment in part of your recruitment process, or?
Not obviously we don't, but I have been in the past taking some of these tests in the past, but exactly we don't. I tend to judge by I will have one-to-one meeting with the candidates. I would, based on my experience, judge what type of personality they are during that, and then we run practical tests as well to confirm that as well.
And how have you seen that play out in the remote environment? Because I think that's where I found the challenge is that, you know, I've been a manager a long time. If I've got my team in a room, I can start to spot those, you know, that person's more introverted. I'm going to need to directly, you know, things like if I'm having a meeting, I'll email those people ahead of time going, is there anything you want to raise? Because then I can raise it and I don't have to, you know, wait for all the kind of extroverts are sitting there shouting. I think when you've got a remote team, it's harder because you know, onboarding people remotely, much slower to kind of, you can't rely on that kind of line of sight to see what they're like as a person in the room. So yeah, in terms of kind of practical measures, have you tried to implement anything there from a remote perspective?
Obviously with the remote, we've got very tight, I'm a task manager. I love you know, assigning tasks to people and get, you know, like everyone to do job on a given day. So in many ways, my team is being monitored by the task that they have to do. So that's one way of doing it from my side. The other, of course, a way that, you know, we tend to the thing with personality type is that some personality type are doing very well on their own, you know, like they like to be in their own space and they can think better when they're on their own. But there are other personality type that need to have meeting and be in the room in order for them to generate their ideas or being, you know, as effective in doing their job. So in those instances, then all we have to do is just create that forum for them to have connection with other people that they can talk and, you know, get their ideas bound up someone. So that's why we have this meeting throughout the week. And then we also have, you know, kind of tasks that manage everyone's performance at the back of it as well.
Yeah, I love, we were talking about our task list earlier. I'm obsessed with Monday.com at the moment. I just, I just like the fact you can tick things off. It feels like you're making progress. So even if you're having a horrible day, you could just be like, right, that's done. And then when I found out you could assign tasks to people, I was like, well, this is brilliant. Just assigning everything off. But no, it's, no, I think you're right. People don't like, it's interesting. I think when we were working all in the office, there was a bit of a resistance to much more structured kind of assessment of work, like, you know, like tasks and being able to remotely tick them off. But it's interesting how I think remote working's made that so important and crucial because you don't have that. You lose so much not being in the same room. You know, you lose that sort of non-verbal communication. You lose that kind of that quick, not meetings, but the coffee shop, walk and the you know, the water cooler moments that actually drive a lot of activity in businesses. And but that's been replaced and can be managed. In the absence of that, can be managed with structure. And it's been interesting for me how anecdotally I've sort of spotted that seems to be really, really welcomed, because otherwise you have this disconnect. And a few people, when the sort of pandemic started, they're working remotely, but I had this conversation where people felt like they almost were working, but because they couldn't see anybody and they weren't meeting anybody, or weren't traveling or weren't seeing their colleagues, that they almost felt like they were in this sort of Truman Show where they were like, they didn't even know whether the work they were doing was sort of meaningful. So just having that structure, I think it's interesting what that does to people. But it might just be me.
No, I think everyone needs some structure, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I wanted to move the conversation slightly towards like funding, and this is the bit I mentioned that I thought would be appropriate on International Women's Day, because you and I had a conversation about funding and gender bias, really, and you know, how does gender bias impact the funding experience for women? Yeah, you're an entrepreneur, so I just thought if this is a conversation you're happy to have, I'd love to have it.
Yeah, sure. You know, I'm not going to guess, but I'm going to give you a stats. According to British Business Bank, only 1% of VC money is going towards supporting female-only business. Now, compared to about 89% that goes toward funding the male-only founded business. So
Wow.
if you compare, you know, like the number, then you can make it, you know, a rationalizations that there is some bias there.
Yeah.
And this is obviously going to be an issue for women who are trying to run their business or trying to get into that, creating their own business, because with this kind of, you know, such a imbalance in funding means that a lot few women would be able to break that initial, you know, setting up their business barrier and become successful. So what we ideally want, to make more way for women to get into that, you know, kind of building their business successfully, so that they can then also inspire other women to follow suits.
What does that do psychologically as well when you're basically, you know, it's one thing. So if I want to go out for VC funding, theoretically, I'm going, well, 90% of the people that they fund are like me. If you're a woman trying to set up your business and you're going out for funding, knowing that's there, what does that sort of... the way I was thinking that your barrier for entry is so much higher. You have to be so much more sure, so much more kind of confident that your ideas to go for it. So it's hugely damaging to innovation.
Yeah, certainly. And luckily I was, you know, ignorant is blessed. And I was, you know, like blessed when I first started, because I didn't realize that this was such a big issue. I thought that, you know, like, although I hear that everyone was, you know, telling me about this gender bias, but I didn't expect this going to be this much of a problem. But of course, you know, like as I face it head on, I still, you know, determined to make the best of the opportunity that have been given to me. I've, you know, like we've been getting a lot of support from, you know, various networks. We've got fantastic male allies that supporting us as well. So I think, you know, like we are really set up. We have really built good foundation for good business, and we really hope that other people will see that as well. Personally, you know, I'm all about doing the right thing, and even if it's going to take me longer to get there, I'm patient. I'm not patient in the world. So this is, you know, like why I think within the VC community, now that ESG become very important for their metric and KRI, I hope that it would give more opportunity for women to get into it, because there are, you know, kind of a study out there, the RBC Wealth Management study found that women or female-led business are twice as likely to care about EGS than their colleagues male. That means that, you know, like if ECS is the future, then women are much more, you know, we've got good foundation to build good business in this space.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much going on. I mean, it's there's plenty of data out there that supports that women-led businesses are more successful over time as well, and certainly more diverse businesses are more successful. Because I always think that now when I see a more established business, if it's got a woman leading it, when you see how sadly rare that is, do you think that says something about that business anyway? That says something about the culture of that business that, and this is not about merit, and this is not a conversation about that. It's about, you know, we're saying that they've elected the best person, but clearly there is bias that exists. So I think if we see a large business that's led by a woman, I think it's in itself that business is better set up anyway, because clearly there is a acknowledgement there that the bias is, I'm sure it's not absent, but it's less prevalent. So therefore, it's already a more forward-thinking business. So it has a much wider implication than just filling a number on a sheet or being representative. It says something about that business. So I don't know where I was going with that. I think I was about to jump on my soapbox, so I'll back away.
Yes, I certainly agree that, you know, like you should recruit people by their merit, and what we should not do is to build more bias into our recruitment and retention process. It should be based on, you know, like that, you know, individual performance. But we have to make sure that our metrics is actually something that could measure women's as well as not just like male centric behavior.
Yeah.
So not just profit, but also the impact bit.
Yes.
Most women tend to care more about the cause and the purpose than just building their business for, you know, like for profit. So that's why we kind of need to kind of review our metrics, review the question set, so that we have the same question that we ask in exactly the same manner that would be asked men and women, so that we don't build our own kind of, you know, like biases into the way we ask people question, whether it's at interview stage or at, you know, kind of meeting stage.
Yeah, I mean, we had a conversation on it before, and Sam White, the CEO of Stella, was on here. And there was a conversation about VCs asking different types of questions to female-led businesses, to male-led businesses. And essentially, the male-led businesses got, I think, sort of more confirmation questions, and female-led businesses had more kind of like challenging questions. So essentially, it was like confirmation bias in the questioning. But I think you made a really interesting point to me, which you were talking about that men are statistically more likely or more inclined to overestimate their projections. You know, so should we evaluate female-led or female-founded pitches in a different way, do you think?
You see, there is no good answer here. If I say yes, I probably get a lot of complaint. Obviously, I think, you know, like one should be more cautious about one's number. And I think, you know, like VC should be more aware of either the cultural differences between male founding business and female founding business. That's one, you know, like, and the second part is to your point around, you know, like the question set and making sure that you raise the question in exactly the same manner so that you don't build your own bias into it. And that is not the only thing, and also the perception of the answer as well. So if women answer, a classic example that you may have heard about is that women, if they're too confident, they could come across as arrogant, they could come across as aggressive. But if men are, you know, like behaving in exactly the same manner, he's confident, he's he's got all the positive trait, whereas women who are behaving in exactly the same way that you would expect from a, like good business person, we don't get the same response. So I think we just need to change our perception of how women should be in workplace. That we, like to your point, like you nailed on, you were talking about we should be allowed to be ourselves in workplace. We should be able to be vulnerable, be women, be caring, but at the same time having the same respect as any male founder. We don't have to behave in such the same way. Otherwise, what you're going to do is that a lot of women, by the time they get to that top position, we're going to be, like behaving like men because we are too afraid to be ourselves in workplace. So you want to encourage us to be ourselves. Because we bringing diversity into this entire building new business industry, and we want to maintain our own integrity. We want to feel safe and feel that we can be accepted for who we are. So that is important, I think, as part of that diversity and inclusion piece. Because when you suppress your best quality, you also suppress all the other good stuff that come with it. So, yeah.
I was thinking that as you were talking, because I'm trained to administer a couple of psychometric assessments, and one of those. It's about behaviors. Most of them are about behaviors, and we talk about what is your tendency, and it's not saying what you can and can't do. And they always say it's the equivalent of everyone has a preferred writing hand, and most people can write their name with both hands, but like I'm right-handed. It's a waste of my time writing with my left hand because it's so inefficient. It's the same with behaviors. And I was just thinking of that when we were talking, is that getting people to act in a way that is not themselves is not only impractical, as you rightly pointed out, it's really inefficient because we don't do that with training. And it's just a really old-fashioned way of looking at the world. Like, it used to be the thing that you assess someone's training needs. And so if a person was really poor in one area, you'd concentrate all your training on sort of trying to get them up. But the point is, they're probably never going to be better than average on that thing. Whereas if they might be poor in one area, but really good naturally in another, create their job around that, make that their role, and take away this bit that they're not very good at. And it does go down to sort of respecting people's, any gender, any kind of thing where you're trying to force someone to fit a role doesn't work. I think I just think it's tiring for that person. They're never going to see the best of them, and we see this in like little micro not microaggressions, but I think in micro kind of ways in like culture. For example, I'm not a guy that's particularly bothered about going to play a round of golf. I don't really care about going to sporting events. I like try and write terrible plays in my spare time. I like going to the theatre, and I always remember this story. I was pitching for a piece of business. We'd had this great conversation about football. These guys were football players, these two potential clients, and they played football a lot, and they were talking about football, and then they sort of asked me about what I did, and I happened to be I was doing some acting at the time, and I was in a play. And they turned around and stopped the meeting, and they went, well, are you going to have time to do this work? And even that in itself, I thought was so strange. It was like, well, of course I am. It's my hobby. Your football, we spent half an hour talking about football, which is your hobby. And there's no question about whether you've got time to do your work. So it's just an awareness that people have different things, and respecting as well people's professionalism. But there's so much to go there. And one thing that you raised again, which I thought was so important, was about networking. And I think that's how we originally connected, because we were talking about the flight series. But, networking is inherently built around like a male dynamic, I think. That would be, what impact does it have to you? Are there issues for women networking, particularly when you talk about venture funding, but even in the insurance industry?
Yeah, if we're talking about pre-COVID and now,
yeah, true.
Pre-COVID, where and if we're talking about the culture of men going to local pub and talk about business, then yes, we certainly, I certainly cannot relate to that, because first of all, I don't drink very much, and I can't, keep my liquor. So I won't last for long in that kind of, environment. But I think post-COVID is kind of, now that everyone is working from home, a lot of meetings, a lot of networking is either virtual, or even if it's meet, it would be in a specific event. So it's kind of nearly help level playing field for women to be in that environment as well, and get their business done.
Yeah, I mean, I've found that. I think the remote working it's allowed me. I mean, I'm strangely anxious for a guy that does a lot of the things I do, and I prefer. There's a lot of me that prefers like remote meetings. I I feel much more comfortable, and then I like the funny thing is I get my energy from people. I like being around people, but I'm also I'm very much more comfortable in this kind of a virtual kind of setting, and I think that has helped but my worry is that I'm already sort of seeing that trailing off of the willingness to do the video conferences, the video networking, and people pushing much more to that kind of face-to-face. Do you worry that that's just going to come back and just be like the pure way? And do you think that's going to negatively impact people's opportunities to sort of effectively network, particularly for women?
Yes, I think, going forward, a lot of company probably would adopt the hybrid working, like remotely and office model. And that I think it would reduce some of the hours of people being able to just go to a local pub and spend together. I think that culture will eventually become more neutralized. And this is where, women could benefit from having a more structured networking event, because at the end of the day, women are fantastic in organizing events. If you look at, like your family who organizing Christmas, birthday, right? So we are very used to that, and we use to socialize and building network, and women should be like the master of relationship at the end of the day. So it naturally, we are very good in connecting with other people. We just need like that a use case, a business case to be able to bring us there. And I have no problem, for example, spending hours with my male colleagues and working, or with my client. I haven't got a problem with that. So certainly it hasn't really stopped me in any way. But yeah, you're right. If someone asking me to go and spend hours in the local pub, I probably would get bored in half an hour.
Yeah, that's true. I do wonder how the pubs have, particularly EC3, have fared during this time when we're in this hybrid model. But I could talk about this all day with you, and I was, thank you so much for coming on, and particularly discussing some of those issues, because I think that I can't speak to that perspective, and particularly the funding I think is interesting, because I've got a little bit of an insight to recruitment and some of the kind of gender led issues that happen there. But I think for someone that's gone out and successfully raised money and to speak on these issues, I thank you, because it's been something I've wanted to do for a long time. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being a guest. But I always like to end on what's coming up for you this year. What should we look out for Tapoly? Is there any sort of exciting developments with the business for 2022?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, like this year, we hope it's going to be an amazing year, and I can tell that we are getting, there. We're going to be zoom in on our technology this year, like we have done in the past two. And but in addition to that, we've also got very exciting project overseas. So we are, kind of, as we are entering the emerging market, which we are very excited about, we will be kind of focus on some of the emerging technology aspect, and as well as the kind of new product development in those regions.
Amazing, amazing. Look, sounds like a packed 2022. Well, look, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I hope we get a chance to meet over the Insurtech week. Yeah, I look forward to catching up with you very soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.